Welcome everyone, my name is Maria Lucci. I'm the Director of Research Communications Projects at Beyond Celiac. I have proudly worked here for over 6 years, and I'm excited today to be joined by this awesome group. We've got Phil, Emily, Erin, and Liz here to talk about how they've tackled and are thriving on the gluten-free diet. We all understand how difficult the diet can be, especially the transition and adjustment initially. But today's panelists are using their knowledge to help make it a little bit easier and help everyone feel less alone, whether they're newly diagnosed, not a typical gluten-free eater, love to travel, or dating, or headed off to college. But before we dive into our topics, I'd like to introduce each of our panelists. We have Phil, who is the creator behind the popular Phil Hates Gluten. This is a great website and social pages. In 2018, Phil was diagnosed with, and bear with me here, eosinophilic esophagitis. Phil can fill us in better on that. I think a lot of people just call it EOE. So he has been eating gluten-free and dairy-free, which has helped alleviate the symptoms of this disease. He's made it his mission to create funny and relatable content about being gluten-free so that people feel a little bit less alone on their health journey. I especially, appreciate having a male's voice in this space, which can often be heavily female-oriented. Liz Purvis, right here on the end, is a celiac disease advocate and content creator at Yeet That Wheat on Instagram and TikTok. She's living with celiac disease, and her content focuses on health equity and her experiences as a Black woman living with celiac disease. Liz shares educational materials, reviews, recipes, and so much more through her social media channels. And she is also a member alongside me on the Beyond Celiac DAI Advisory Board. Erin Smith, right here, has been living with celiac disease since 1981, so she's pretty much grown up fully gluten-free, long before it was quote-unquote trendy. She has a unique perspective of growing up in the gluten-free community. In 2011, Erin founded Gluten-Free Globetrotter, a travel website that provides information about eating gluten-free, traveling with celiac around the globe. To date, Erin has been to 25 countries, 38 states, 3 continents, living and eating gluten-free 100% of the time. Erin is a strong celiac advocate and a friend of Beyond Celiac, who has been organizing celiac support groups for close to 20 years. She is the founding organizer of the New York City Celiac Meetup Group, and she's founded the Santa Cruz Celiacs while living in California. And last but not least, we have Emily Shaw, best known for her TikTok account, Emily Reina, which went viral with her series that followed her journey as she completely renovated her parents' home as a surprise over the course of 1 month. Her YouTube channel and TikTok are now destinations for decor and design content, budget-friendly home projects, and her ongoing series, DM DIY, where she helps solve her viewers' biggest design dilemmas. She's been featured in New York Times, Architectural Digest, Business of Home, The Drew Barrymore Show, and more. Something her fans may not know, though, is that she also happens to be doing all this living with celiac disease. So welcome, and thanks everyone again for being here. Erin, since you have been living with the gluten-free diet the longest, let's start with you. You have the unique experience of not remembering a time before being gluten-free. Some newly diagnosed people believe they won't be able to travel, but obviously you've shown that it is possible. Do you think being diagnosed at such a young age helped you feel more comfortable navigating the diet in new locations?
So I was diagnosed when I was 2, back in 1981, and I don't know life with gluten. I do know teenage and college years of being very sick and making a lot of mistakes because we didn't have words like cross-contact back then. So it was a lot of learn by doing. But being comfortable, I don't know any other way of life, and I really give my parents a lot of credit, and I know Dr. Ehrlich and Dr. Verma were talking before about like living your life and not being hypervigilant. We just did what we knew. There was no internet. I didn't have a community. I didn't meet anyone until I was a teenager. So I didn't know who to talk to about this except my family. And my family just kind of always treated me quote unquote normal, which I hate to say, but it's really, they just treated me how they were raising their firstborn child. So, I traveled from a young age. My grandmother lived in Canada. We actually joined the Canadian Celiac Association first, and Alice knows there wasn't really much information except for that. So I got paper newsletters in the mail, and I like really looked forward to it as a kid, like, hey, I got my newsletter. It's an interesting question because I don't know any other way of living, but I like to talk to parents with newly diagnosed children because your kids are going to be okay, and it's a learning curve, but I would like to encourage you not to treat your child as other and to really give them normal childhood experiences like I had, because I really, and I see this now, I have a 4-year-old and he has a peanut allergy and we still travel the world, and it's very nerve-wracking as a parent, but I don't want him to ever feel like he can't because of his peanut allergy, and I never wanted to feel like I can't because of my celiac and also shellfish allergy and kiwi, I have a list too, so I think it's really, we just didn't know any different then, so it's hard to compare.
Yeah. So before we move on, I would love to hear what are some of your favorite, like, that you think are the best locations or maybe easier for someone who is newly diagnosed to travel to.
Sure. This is like picking your favorite child, by the way. Like, I have my favorite quote is, you can't have a favorite place until you've seen them all. And like, that is my goal in life, is to see them all. But I'm biased, but it's also a great place. I'm from New York. I live in Brooklyn. We have more than 35 dedicated gluten-free restaurants and bakeries in New York City and Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn. So New York is really great. I also really enjoy Philly. Now, I will preface this by saying I do a ton of research, and if you were in Jen's talk earlier, like, that is how you have to travel. You have to do this research. But in the United States, New York City, Philadelphia, and Portland, Oregon are my top 3. And then out of the US, Italy, and we talked about Italy earlier. They just passed the law where all children have to be tested for celiac, which is fantastic, but Italy is really like a dream place if you have celiac. And I was just telling my table earlier, I cried in Italy eating bread and pasta and gluten-free, of course, but like sitting outside of the Vatican, and I was like, I would never, as a child who grew up eating rice cakes for the first 15 years of her life, because there was no gluten-free bread, but I would never have imagined that. So Italy, put Italy on your list for sure. So.
The rice cakes, like, everyone's like, you can have a rice cake. I think there was a book about just rice cakes for people with celiac disease, so it's really nice to not be eating rice cakes today.
Yeah, for sure.
Does anyone else on the panel have any like thoughts on travel? Have there been any like tips or places that you've been that really surprised you?
I went to Milan,
Oh.
and I did end up getting contaminated, but I found like a really good way to translate the ingredients on the different menus. There's this feature on the Google app if you have it, and you can scan it and it translates all of the words, so you can look up the ingredients, and I use that every time that I travel where there's a language barrier.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've used that too. It's really cool. You can actually like point it up at things and it'll on your screen translate it within the picture. Did anyone else have something about travel? No.
I haven't traveled that much since my diagnosis.
Yeah, it can be daunting. Phil, what inspired you to start Phil Hates Gluten?
Can you guys hear me? So I was diagnosed with eosinophilic esophagitis. I pronounced it wrong, I think, until like a year and a half ago, so don't worry about it. It's not easy. I call it EOE. So I was diagnosed with EOE in 2018. Didn't know what it was. Essentially, it's like inflammation of my esophagus. It causes me to have a lot of hard time swallowing foods. Food actually get caught in my esophagus and feels like you're choking, amongst a bunch of other fun GI symptoms that we know are like correlated with these things that aren't necessarily like main symptoms. So I was going through a lot, and I figured out that through my elimination diets, I figured out that gluten and dairy were two issues for me. They're two of the most common issues for EOE. When I cut that out, the trouble swallowing got a lot better, and it actually got to a point now where I don't have any trouble swallowing. So the second I kind of cut, not the second, but soon after I cut gluten and dairy, I could swallow again. And that was really impactful because it was super scary to think that I could choke on food at any given time and just have trouble eating. So once I figured that out, I obviously did what anyone does, is like look up, life with eosinophilic esophagitis, life with gluten-free, and especially with EOE, everything I was reading online, Googling, because now I'm at TikTok, but TikTok wasn't as big back then, so I Googled it the old-fashioned way, and it was all depressing. Honestly, like everything I was reading seeing on YouTube or Google was like super sad and kind of to the point. And I was at this point where like I was feeling better, and I felt like people were documenting what they felt like before they started feeling better. And me being, I guess, who I am and how I grew up, like making videos with my brother and doing stuff like that, I was like, okay, let's see if I can bring kind of a positive spin to this, having EOE and living gluten-free, as I'm learning how to live gluten-free and communicate that to my friends and try to explain what EOE is, without having to sit them down for 45 minutes. So I made the account and I started it actually doing a very specific thing. I started it rating gluten-free beers, because I was like, I want to find good gluten-free, whatever. And then so I was like, beers. I mean, when you think of beer, when you look at the list of what's gluten, it's like, everything that you love. It's pasta, it's bread, it's beer. And so I was like, okay, let's see if there's any good gluten-free beers out there. So I made a point to like go and try to find them, and I would drink them on these videos and rate them. And through that, it was like kind of a simple idea. Through that, I kind of started talking about EOE, and over the course of like a year or so, I was getting people reaching out over DM or in my comments or whatever it is, and I was starting to like create a community, which is a community I didn't have when I was first diagnosed. I literally didn't know how to pronounce it again, and I didn't know anyone else with EOE. I didn't know anyone else who was gluten-free or even celiac in my personal life. So it was like super lonely. I didn't know what to make of anything. And so through this account, I ended up meeting people in my comments and my DMs, making friends, being able to do what was just said, like climbing up a mountain and saying, oh, my legs really hurt, or my feet really hurt, this sucks. Like being able to do that with someone, even on the internet, was like super cool and reassuring and validating that what I was going through wasn't all just me and I was by myself. So eventually I moved on from beer and started doing more like skits, which is like what was fun for me once TikTok came out, and tried to be just goofy and fun with it. And yeah, I don't know if that was super long-winded, but I guess that was the inception.
No, that was good. Thank you. But you all four create content within this space. Maybe I'll open it up to everybody. What's something that you've maybe surprising that you've learned, or something that you've taken away from since you've started your channels? Well, Emily's a little bit more on the DIY, but same question.
I mean, I can go, yeah. I guess for me, when I started my channel, I didn't have anybody who looked like me in a celiac space, in a gluten-free space. As you know, there are not a lot of, even if we look around the room, right? Like, how many people of color are in the room? And that's something that we are trying to work on. It's part of why I'm partnering with Beyond Celiac. But I felt very alone, not just because there weren't people in my real life who had celiac, but there were also just like nobody who looked like me, nobody who was going to understand the struggles I was going through. And there is a misconception that celiac is a white disease. It's a Caucasian or European disease. So when you're phenotypically not white and you say you have celiac disease, a lot of people are like, oh, haha, that's really funny, So for me, I guess it was really comforting to come into this space and then be so welcomed by people who had gone through that same experience of having celiac disease and be like, we want you here. We see you, we understand what you're going through. And then also to find other people of color who are like, I know exactly what you've been through. And so to create that kind of space together has been a really meaningful and impactful thing. And I'm hoping that, through these kind of events, through these more community-focused, community-led efforts, we can find more people who, feel very alone, feel very isolated, and we can also then, in turn, spread more awareness about celiac disease and, eventually get everybody diagnosed who has it. So that's my perspective.
I want to jump on that and say it is the community. I didn't know anyone, and I still meet people every day through instant message or DM that are like, I don't know anyone else. So if that one person reaches out to me and I'm like, well, you know me, and here's who you should follow, and because the community is so important, and I was so glad that Terry said that, because when I joined a support group for the first time, I was 15, and everyone in that group was like 100. And I'm like, Mom, why are you bringing me here? Everyone is really old. I have an old person's disease. But then as I got older, and then, I was in my 20s working in Manhattan, I was like, there's got to be people that want to go to happy hour with me, right? So that's kind of where the New York City Celiac Meetup Group came about. And but that community, even being here today, and I've known Alice probably 15 years, it's like so full circle for me that like all you people know what I'm talking about, and it's really amazing because I didn't have that as a kid. So I do what I do to meet people like on this panel, and the community really is so important.
I think with my platform, I'm not specifically a celiac content creator. And so for me, something that's been really shocking that I've learned is just how many people have celiac, because people don't come to my page for celiac advice or anything like that. But every time that I mention that I have celiac just briefly in a video, whether it's because I'm talking about a trip that I'm on and I had to eat something, I just randomly will say that I have celiac somewhere in my video, and there's just an influx of comments of people being like, I had no idea you have celiac, I have it too, that's so cool. And so I've created this really big online community with other people with celiac that I never expected to find, because I only know one person in real life who has celiac because I come from a small town. So I think just the sense of community is really strong, even if people aren't necessarily looking for it.
Yeah, to like what you said, like when I was diagnosed, and I feel like when a lot of people are diagnosed with whatever and have to figure out that they're gluten-free, you almost are curious who else has it. It's like kind of what we're all saying. It's like gluten-free celebrities, and then you read them, and it's like this person might have a gluten intolerance, and you're like, come on, just be a celiac for me one time. So it's super cool to see people on social and even doing whatever we're doing on social, whether they're an athlete or someone who's a content creator or whatever, just to have that and to know that someone is also gluten-free, and you can feel like you have someone to not look up to, but connect with, that has a platform you can be like, okay, I can be confident, I can do this too, because they live this life like this and they're a superstar athlete or whatever. I think it's just cool to have that, I guess, representation might be the word, in some sense.
Yeah. We're always on the lookout for celebrities.
Yeah.
Jennifer Esposito has celiac disease?
She does. Yeah. And Annalee Ashford, Broadway star. Yeah. She's done some nice little videos for us. Very nice. Highly recommend watching her things. So also for all of you, what are some of the common misconceptions about living gluten-free that you experience through your platform? Because I know with the Beyond Celiac social media platform, we get some DMs and some things that are like, I heard that I can't eat anything. I'm going to have to drink water for the rest of my life, or, that sort of thing.
I can answer. It's not necessarily something like that, but I think that I just made a video about this a month ago, but it's that people think that we just love talking about being gluten-free, that we just are dying to tell someone that we're gluten-free and that we have celiac or whatever. That in reality, a lot of us feel somewhat of reservation for it. We feel almost self-conscious bringing it up to a waiter when we're a group of friends or something like that, and we feel like we need to say sorry or whatever it is. I feel like there is this weird stigma that gluten-free people are doing it. I mean, there still is somewhat for the fad or whatever, but it kind of sucks when you're absolutely not doing that, and like you have to apologize for feeling like a nuisance or whatever, when in reality, like you don't want to be talking about it. You wish you could just be sitting down and being like, can I just get like a burger with fries, instead of having to be like, well, how is this in cross-contamination and all that stuff. So I feel like that's a big misconception. When I get any like trolls or haters, it's like, your whole personality is gluten-free, and I get it, I have a whole account about being gluten-free, so maybe that's why, but aside from that, like, it's not necessarily all we want to talk about. It's just we need to talk about it because we're always put in situations that food is around, or it's some sort of risk for getting sick or something like that. So we have to bring it up, not that we want to.
I think that's a really good point. Like on the panel previously, like Dr. Varma was talking about hypervigilance, and I think vigilance and hypervigilance, there is a very fine line, but for us, for most of the people in this room, it is something that is pretty, commonly in the back of our heads, especially when we're in social scenarios. And I'm very lucky, like knock on wood, I don't have a lot of negative energy and negative comments on my content. But, in real life, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, just a crumb, is that really going to make you that sick, right? And it's just because it's not tattooed on my forehead, or because I don't have a very visible physical disability, doesn't mean that it's going to have that same kind of debilitating effect. I mean, that's part of the reason why celiac falls under the ADA, because of how drastically it can affect your quality of life. So I think, it's a really good point that you're bringing up.
I think on my platform specifically, I think the fact that gluten-free became a fad for a while is something that has damaged its reputation online for the whole celiac community in general. And any time that I mention that I have celiac online, I do get an influx of comments that are pretty negative, and I've read them, and oftentimes it's just people saying, you can just eat it, like just eat it, and nothing bad will happen. You can eat gluten, gluten's not bad. And so what I've taken as a response to that is just responding in an educational way. I think also too, with traveling and working with different people on projects, if I ever do get glutened, is what I call it, and I express that to someone, it always gets so drastic so fast. They think that it's like a peanut allergy, and they're like, oh my gosh, do we need to rush you to the hospital? And so I think that's another common misconception, and it's just all about explaining these things to people as they come.
I just wanted to spin this for a little, because I think a misconception when people are diagnosed, or they tend to focus on everything they can't do, and that's where I like to be like, but you can. And so, and I get it. My sister was diagnosed as an adult, so we have almost 20 years between our, 25 years between our diagnoses. But there's kind of this, and there's this mourning period, right? You're diagnosed, you need to go through mourning, and so I get it. But there is a point where there are things that you can do. And I know Phil's having a wedding. I had a gluten-free wedding. Nobody knew it was gluten-free. I didn't tell anybody, because I just didn't want them to come in with that, like, oh, the food is going to be terrible. I went to sleepaway camp as a child. I've been to 25 countries. I had a baby, and a lot of people are like, how did you have a baby? And I was like, well, because I healed myself, right? And and so I think there's just so many misconceptions of what cannot be done with celiac, but it actually can be done. And when you're healthy, and you can go on with your life. So I know I talked to a few people that are just diagnosed a couple of months, and I just want you to give yourself a grace period, because it does get better.
Emily, you kind of went into this a little bit, but as a content creator with a strong online presence, you share various aspects of your life, and you mentioned that sometimes you just put it out there, I have celiac disease. Have you found that your gluten-free life has resonated with your audience in unexpected ways?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that I've just created this community with people online, and it's really interesting because you see all of these names on social media, but you never really like know anything about them. And so the second that someone enters my comment section is like, wait, I have celiac too, and I didn't know that you had that. And then we start this discourse, and then we become friends, and it's just like this whole like online community. So I would say definitely that.
Liz, as a member of the Beyond Celiac DI Advisory Board, can you share some insights in the work being done to ensure diversity and inclusion within the gluten-free community, and maybe some ideas that, perhaps that we've been talking about on, or your own ideas on fostering a more inclusive environment for all individuals?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, there is a DEI advisory board. You can check it out. You can check out information about the different initiatives that are being done on the Beyond Celiac website. I'm on the board, Maria is also on the board, as well as a lot of other really great people. And there is a lot of work that's being done, a lot of work that's already been done, a lot of things in development. So just to break down some of those things, what drew me to Beyond Celiac was the work of Amanda Carty, and she is researching celiac disease and the diagnosis rates that we're seeing in different demographics. Specifically, she's working out of University of Alabama, which, as we know, Alabama is very demographically different from New England or the Northeast. And so what she found in her research was that the short form version is that testing is not being done at adequate rates. The tools that we have for testing are not necessarily accurate for certain demographics. Specifically in Black people, we're seeing that the TTG rate is upwards of, I believe it was 80% of people who were being tested with a blood test. It would come back as normal, but a biopsy after an upper endoscopy would confirm celiac disease, as well as a gluten-free diet would alleviate those symptoms. So, this is very new cutting-edge research, and it's very profound research showing that, okay, there is a test that we are using as the gold standard effectively, and if that blood test is a barrier to entry for getting an endoscopy, we're missing a whole group of people who aren't getting this endoscopy that they need or the follow-up care that they need. It can lead to misdiagnosis, so it goes on and on and on. So Beyond Celiac has written several articles talking about this research. You can also find it on their website. It's really profound, very interesting, and I think it's something that we need to explore more. Beyond Celiac has also partnered with the National Minority Quality Forum, I believe I got that right.
That's right.
As well as Takeda, on different equity and inclusion initiatives. Recently, they have partnered with Colors of Crohn's and Chronic Illness, which is a group that focuses more on Crohn's disease as well as other GI-related chronic illnesses in communities of color. They also have a website, very cool. There's Voices of Celiac Disease, where anybody in this room can submit their story of how they were diagnosed. And there's a lot more people of color as well as other marginalized groups who have submitted stories. And it's really nice to go through those stories and be like, oh my gosh, I've been through this exact same thing. So I definitely recommend checking those out. There was recently a community survey that was sent out. Some of you who are on the mailing list might have participated in it, asking what kind of ways we can do better, but also what kind of things you think are already working. I'm going through my list. There is also this summit was part of one of the conversations we had about, okay, how can we foster community better? And that was something that we really wanted to focus on, not just from the survey results, but also from, talking to people? How can we as a community become more interconnected, not just like through a screen? Because obviously all of us are content creators. If you follow us on social media or wherever we may be, that's how you know us. You haven't met us in real life, but we are also people, and you're people too, and we want to make those kind of connections so that our community can grow stronger. So those are some of the things that are being worked on. I might have missed a couple, but
Well, you can check out the page, and I love the plug for Voices of Celiac Disease. Please, if you haven't shared your story on there, please go on. It really is a way to like see and share with the community, like someone else has gone and has the same sort of perspective as you, so you're really not alone. Emily, you've tackled a range of design challenges on your platform. How do you apply your problem-solving skills from design to managing a gluten-free diet on a busy schedule?
I would say that there's nothing but overlap between the two. My job is basically to take a problem that I'm presented with and make something out of it with design, and that's basically what I have to do for every single meal that I ever eat. So I think that there's a lot of overlap between the two, and I think a really interesting example of this is I've had to turn down a lot of opportunities because I have celiac. I'll get offered something really cool from a brand, and they're like, can you come do this? And I'm like, actually, I can't eat that. And they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe next time. And so that's happened to me quite often. And most recently, I've been collaborating with a brand, and I can't eat their food either. But I was diagnosed late in high school, and I used to eat their food all the time, and I loved it. And so we've been having this discussion, and for some reason they still want to work with me, and they've been talking to me about how they could implement gluten-free into their brand more, and they've also been talking about just ways that I could still advertise for them, but in a design approach. So instead of eating their food, maybe I'm gifting it to someone, or maybe I am creating a design that's based on their color scheme of the campaign that they're making. It's just like all of that discussion, and it's a constant problem solving, and to deny the overlap between my design world and my celiac world is, you just can't deny it. It all overlaps.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, even like students, where am I going to go to college? You know,
Yeah.
like making huge life decisions. Often, you know, you have to take the celiac into consideration first. For everybody, whoever wants to go first, beyond physical health, how has embracing a gluten-free lifestyle impacted your emotional or well-being or mental health?
I can go. When I was going through my EOE, and I couldn't swallow, I couldn't really eat anything, it was really tough. I was starting to get, especially when I got food impactions, I was starting to get super, super anxious, and I didn't really ever feel that in my life. I don't know if it was an anxiety attack, panic attack, but I got a handful of those when I was at my previous job, which was for like a sales organization. I would be on a call with a customer and be like, I gotta go. I would hang up and I would run into a room or the bathroom, because I would just have a random spout of like a panic attack, which was super, super scary if anyone has ever had those. That's one of the biggest things, that when I cut out gluten and dairy, that went away like almost like immediately. I never got another one again. And so that was a big sign to me that like my body is not accepting this, and that it was tied, my physical health, obviously, with the trouble swallowing and everything, was tied to the mental health too. And I think probably the worry of not having to choke on food again, it, helped with the mental health part of it too. So I think that for me, it cleared up a lot of that, and is like almost better than being able to eat without worrying how I'm going to swallow it. It's knowing that I'm not going to get a random spout of a panic attack or something, because that was the worst. Didn't like it.
I think for me, at the start of my career, the fact that I had celiac was really hard on my mental health, because I was so scared entering all of these new scenarios that I was already nervous to be in, and then having to be the person who was like, actually, I can't eat what all of you guys are eating. Can I order something separate? Or just having to ask for all of these accommodations. But I think having celiac has actually improved my mental health through these scenarios over time. And I know that sounds weird, but I think just because like the strength that it takes to just live everyday life like this, and the strength that it takes to have to put yourself out there and talk, especially if you're someone who doesn't like to do that, like myself, it's made me a much more bold person, and it's made me interact with so many more people, which has made me so much more fulfilled, because if you can talk about your GI tract and everything that's going wrong down there, then you can be comfortable talking about anything. So I think it's made me a lot more open and just like free as a person.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think, I mean, again, since I was diagnosed so young, I don't know any different, but I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in my early 30s, and that really impacted my mental health. I was like, what do you mean I have to take a pill? And I've just been managing this disease with food all my life. And so, but I think having the celiac has like led me to be able to tackle a lot of other things in my life. And, you know, and now with my child being able to like manage his peanut allergy, and you know, we did oral immunotherapy with him, and so knowing a lot about myself and my own body, but also really taking me almost 25 years to be the advocate I am today, because I didn't advocate for myself the first half of my life because I didn't know anyone. I was scared. Nobody talked about it then. So now, like the second half of my life, like similarly, I will talk to anyone about my GI tract, you know, but it's like empowered me in a way that I didn't really have at the beginning of my life, so.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because from when I was diagnosed during the like early stages of the pandemic. So for me, I went gluten-free before I had an official diagnosis. It was a probable diagnosis, and then I got my official diagnosis after another round of blood testing. But for me, I was in a very safe space to figure things out when I was gluten-free. You know, like a lot of people, I went from, you know, eating whatever I want to like only eating certified gluten-free, and then from there I figured things out. But it became difficult for me when I went back to school because I was diagnosed right before my senior year of college. And we were in a very strange type of living situation. So I lived on campus, but the kitchens were closed. There was a gluten sensitive room because they don't label anything gluten-free for legal reasons. But that was closed, and that meant I had to get my food from the shared line. And my college was not very good about even labeling, about allergen training. So I was getting very, very sick. And going from a very like safe environment to going to a place where it's like, okay, it's safer for me to order from a restaurant than it is for me to be on a mandatory meal plan. That was very anxiety inducing, and I have anxiety anyways, so you know that obviously didn't help. I was a senior in college. I was trying to finish my degree, and it took a very large group of students meeting with the vice president and the dean of students for anything to change, because there were a lot of people with life-threatening allergies who were getting very sick, were put in dangerous positions, and also threatening to leave the school, which meant their money would go with them. So eventually, it did get sorted out. I was given access to a kitchen where I was able to make food for myself, put myself in a safer situation. But I think it also did teach me to be a better advocate for myself, because I've never really had that much of an issue advocating for myself. And I think that is maybe like the oldest sibling mentality. But even so, I think, you know, when you are forced to, it's really about your health is what it comes down to. When you're forced into that kind of position and it's a survival situation, you know, thinking about your mental health becomes a backseat thing, and you just do what you have to survive, and then you sort it out later. And since then, that was a few years ago, I have been, obviously, a lot more comfortable. I'm better at advocating for myself, but also I think my mental health has improved because, as we know, when you're glutened, there is that mind-gut relationship. And so anytime that your anxiety, your depression, any kind of neurological symptoms that you have, those are going to be exacerbated by being glutened. Plus, you're already feeling all these different things. So it's just like a really cyclical thing. It's not as bad anymore, is the too long don't read.
That's good. I'm curious what a gluten-sensitive room is. Do they just like put you guys in a little room together?
So they have, it's a room, you have to be on a list. It's only activated by key card, but pretty much everything in there is labeled certified gluten-free in the fridge. They have Udi's bagels, separate toasters, but they also have prepped meals from the kitchen.
That's nice.
And those things could be contaminated just based off of proximity and whatnot. So it's all legalese.
So this question actually came from someone in the audience today. Do you have any advice, and this is for anyone who wants to answer, on how to make more friends and or have plans revolve less around food? Because we all know almost every plan, especially when you become an adult, let's go out to dinner, let's go out to drinks, Have you been able to steer into different directions, or?
For me, when I am going out with friends, I typically try to influence the restaurant. When I'm looking for places to eat, I use resources like, Find Me Gluten-Free, Spoken, there's Atlee, the new map with gluten-free locations. There's all these gluten-free accounts that we can look at now. Or there's TikTok. TikTok's great, gluten-free something. Gluten-free blank, and you can find a bunch of information. Hopefully, restaurants, you got to kind of cross-reference and make sure it's okay on something like Find Me Gluten-Free or something. But I think for me, I just try to influence the decision a little bit. And at this point, my friends know that I'm gluten-free and want me to not feel sick and want me to feel okay about it, which is really nice. So they will be okay with going to somewhere else because I wouldn't be able to eat, pizza at this other place. They would go to, Chipotle with me or something like that. So I think for me, it is like speaking up for yourself, like we're all talking about. I was a very go with the flow person, and I still am in a lot of senses, but I've learned to advocate for myself and like what I need and what I want more, and I feel like that's been growth as a whole, and that's definitely a big skill to have when you have any sort of food allergy, is advocating for yourself throughout the process.
Yeah, I think if you have friends that don't try to help you with your celiac and make sure that you're going to places that are safe for you, then they shouldn't be your friends to begin with. But for making new friends, I recommend just other shared interests. Like if you're both interested in the art, try doing paint nights after work, or try doing other types of activities like hiking or sports or anything like that, as opposed to the typical meal. But again, I think if they're your friend, they're your friend.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I am a very type A planner personality. So for me, I also like paint and sip nights. Wine is gluten-free if you like wine. Going to the park, if you like physical activities, you could try pickleball if you don't like physical activities. There's a lot of things that you can do that don't revolve around food. If you are food oriented, then, ask the question first, okay, does anybody have any allergies? Nobody else does? Cool, I do. Let's go to one of these types of places, and I'll give you a list of different places that have different types of food. So, that way everyone's happy, everyone's involved in the decision-making process, but I'm putting my needs, I'm taking the space that I need to have my needs met. And that's what I would recommend for anybody else.
You all said what I wanted to say, but having a list of like your safe places, and then if you're going out with friends, like, hey, what about one of these places? You want pizza? Okay, here. I also agree with Emily that if they're not gonna help you navigate your autoimmune disease, maybe they shouldn't be your friends. I'm lucky that I'm in New York, so there's a lot of non-food activities, but most of my activities revolve around food. And, you know, I was talking to someone earlier, like, about dating. Like, when I met my husband, I proposed going for a walk, basically because it was a blind date, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like him, so then I was like, okay, now we can go for a drink, now we can add dinner. And so I kind of, like, built it up, but I didn't have the first interaction revolve around food, because I already was nervous enough, and I just didn't want to deal with the food part of it. But I think having these, like, little tools, like the list and the other thing I was going to say is find yourself a gluten-free best friend, because I think that just having that one person that you can relate to in like such a personal way, and it's funny because I met my best friend through a meetup group, and we don't even really talk about it anymore because we're just friends, you know, and it makes going out to eat with her very easy because we need to go to the same places. But, you know, finding your person, and it might not be in your family, and it might just be someone you're DMing for 3 years on the internet, like some of my friends here. So, but yeah, I mean, find that person that can relate to you on like that very personal and intimate level.
Yeah, and I would add, you know, I think people are shy and have a hard time making friends these days. It's like, put yourself out there. My very best friend, I met her at a Mommy and Me yoga 67 years ago, and I went home and I found her Facebook page, and I sent her, and I asked her out on a date, you know, a little friend date, and you know what, we're best friends 7 years later. So you kind of just have to like find somebody that you feel like you're gonna click with, and you know, there's a lot of gluten-free people here if you're looking for a gluten-free best friend. Phil, you use humor a lot on your platform. How do you strike a balance between humor and like the seriousness of having to be gluten-free?
Yeah, I try not to roll your eyes when I say laughter is the best medicine, but it is the best medicine outside of a gluten-free diet, in my opinion. I feel like for me, like I find humor in those like awkward little moments of life, like almost that like the Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld, and Office like shows kind of emphasize. And for me, like I think when you do have a food allergy, those awkward moments do come up a lot, especially in the food settings, and sometimes it is really crappy. And for me, like when I was going through like the worst of my EOE, I didn't feel like myself at all. And once I felt like myself again, once I got healthy, and once I started to feel healthy most of the time, I could find, I guess, the humor in it again, and I wanted to be who I wish I could have watched when I was going through the worst of it. So I definitely think that it is good to, I mean, there's so many different resources on social now, and a lot of people are in this room for recipes and, you know, recommendations and groups and you know, all sorts of stuff. So I guess for me, I found my little role in the humor part of it, and it's been a lot of fun and has been awesome. I don't know. That's the end, I guess.
Well, we enjoy the content.
Thanks.
To everyone, how do you handle any negative comments or skepticism about the gluten-free diet that you may receive, you know, even online or even in person?
Can I start?
Go for it.
I like to call it fighting with facts. So somebody alluded to it this morning about this viral video of someone eating gluten in Italy, and it was crazy. But I made a rebuttal video, and I just put facts in there. And I said, look, like, actually, I put it on from Beyond Celiac's website, and, you know, and so I get a lot of negative DMs when I do put comments like that, but I'm very authentic, and what you see is what you get, so I'm gonna put those comments out there. But I just wanted, I didn't want that information to get in the wrong hands. I didn't want a kid to be like, Mom, we're gonna go to Italy and eat whatever we want, or, you know, so, I mean, it's not really fighting, but it's just like presenting the facts. And I love research, and I think this is why I get along with Liz so well, because she loves research. But, you know, just there's so much research that has come out in my lifetime, and I'm constantly learning. So if I can teach someone, something that I learned, or like, really save someone from getting gluten, I also call it getting gluten, but like saving someone that agony of going through that like horrible experience of writhing in pain on the floor like I do, if I can help one person with those facts, then I feel like I've kind of done my job, so.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat. My gut reaction, like a lot of people, is to get like really angry, right? Because it's blatant misinformation, and once it's out there, it's very hard to pull back. That same video, I know there was a gluten-free bakery that actually reposted it. And it's like, you're a bakery, you cater to people with these conditions, and you're putting out this information that can actively harm them. So for me, yes, I really want to get angry and be very impassioned and stand on my soapbox and be like, what is wrong with you? But I try to take a second and meet that person where they are and be like, okay, well, why do you think that? Where did you hear that information? And then present the facts in a way that is as non-confrontational as possible, because anybody being told that they're wrong is going to instantly retreat, and they're going to be like, well, no, you're just picking on me, or whatever the reason would be. So I think starting at where people are at, and then helping, sending people to the reputable sources like Beyond Celiac, like GFCO, like gluten.org. That is the best way to dispel these kinds of myths, this negative information, and to also then help spread education to other people.
I think, I know what posts you guys are talking about too, and I'm glad that I think everyone probably does, but something that's not, I guess, so much misinformation, as compared to that, I feel like if like a friend or a family member or someone online says something that might seem ignorant, it might, I guess I try to put it into my perspective. When I was diagnosed with EOE, I didn't know how to pronounce it. I didn't know what gluten was. I'm Italian. I ate, wheat and pasta and cheese my whole life, and I didn't know what gluten was for the longest time. Obviously, going through this, I had to learn it, and I think that a lot of the times, that's the case. It's like you don't really have. If you don't need to know what gluten is, you might not know unless you're a restaurant or a doctor or whatever it might be. But if you're just a regular person without anyone who's celiac or gluten-free in your life, you might not know what it means, and you might just go off of what these unfortunate perceptions are. So to educate them, like they're saying, in kind of a kind and thoughtful way, those people who aren't being malicious and just are kind of confused and don't really know, I feel like is really important. And I always try to keep that in the back of my mind. Again, when it's not someone who's just being like outright wrong or mean about it, I just I try to imagine me 6 years ago and be like, oh, I didn't know what it was either, so like I wish someone could have explained it to me too. So that's less extreme situations. I feel like that's a good way to go about it as well, online or in person.
Yeah, and I do get negative comments surrounding celiac and everything like that are not constructive, and my motto is always not to respond to any comments if they're negative but not constructive. However, celiac is the one thing that I will break that rule for, because even if the person's just trying to be a troll and they're not going to listen to what I respond with information-wise, there's always so many people in my comments section that are just curious in general, and they will read that and they'll learn from that. And since there's just such a lack of education about celiac in general, I feel like it can be an education opportunity. Even if the person you're talking to doesn't want to receive it, there's other people who will. So that's my motto for that one.
Yeah, that's we do that too as well at Beyond Celiac. If at PSA, if anyone doesn't know the post they're talking about, somebody with a large following on TikTok made a video about how you can eat gluten in Europe and it's different and you'll be just fine, which is not true, and don't do that. So I got the 5-minute warning, so I wanted to let each of you go maybe give a little plug, maybe something you're working on for your platforms. Starting with Liz.
Yeah, so if you don't already follow me, I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Yeet is a word that
we've got
means
it
to
up on
throw. Beautiful. Yeah, my handle is there and there. But I picked yeet because it means to throw, like in Gen Z slang. So, yeah, I came up with that in my dorm room in college, and I have loved it ever since. A lot of my work is focused on equity and inclusion efforts. So if you want to see more diversity in your feed, come to me, because one, I am a diverse person, but two, because I have a lot of resources available to send you to people from different backgrounds, people who might not have celiac but are gluten-free, and yeah, as well as educational resources. So if you want something to share with your family members, like we were talking about, that like educational foundation, we have really easy to digest and understand graphics, so you can share those with people in your life to help educate them a bit more. I also recently started a podcast, which is ad hoc at the moment. Episodes are coming, but we talk about things on the podcast that are things we can't really cover in depth on Instagram. So I invite other content creators on the podcast. Some of the content creators who are here are on that podcast. And we talk about pretty much everything and anything related to being gluten-free, as well as, you know, who that person is behind the content that you're consuming. So check it out. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you listen to a podcast not on that platform, come see me, and I will put it on the platform.
Well, so with Gluten-Free Globetrotter, I'm really, my most traffic is about New York, since I live in New York. So I'm rebuilding out the New York section. I don't know if anybody's here from the meetup group. I've been involved with the Celiac meetup group for 15 years. But I'm building out a dinner series called Gluten-Free Globetrotter Presents, and it's going to different cuisines all through New York City. So Brazilian and Italian and Korean, because I think a lot of people don't realize that we have these options. So if the restaurant isn't 100% gluten-free, I am going in and talking with the chefs. So that's coming soon. And then I just relaunched my customized itinerary services. So people always are like, hey, I'm going to see a show on Broadway, where do I eat? So I just launched that last week through a new platform, but you can find all the information on my website. And really, if you're coming to New York, I love helping people. I love being there, and we have a great selection, but I also do eat at non-dedicated restaurants, and that's kind of what I want to prove with this dinner series, is that we can do it. We can travel the world with a Metro card. So.
For me, my platform is up there. My main platform is TikTok, but I am everywhere else as well. And I guess I have a lot of renovations coming up, and a lot of the content that I share is DIY related. I also have a wallpaper line that's dropping this month that will be fun if you want to purchase it.
That's awesome.
That's my social, Phil Hates Gluten. I'm primarily on Instagram and TikTok. I have been posting to YouTube a little bit. That's been fun. I also sell hot gluten-free merch. I've seen a couple of people wearing some sweaters and stuff, which is really cool. And then, yeah, outside of that, I feel like I'd want to highlight some people I see here, like Lauren right here, Eat Gluten-Free with me, Matt, Glass of Weinstein, Jen, Nomadic Fitzpatrick. There's a bunch of people that I'm probably missing, but there's a lot of great resources here in this room who I trust and are great resources for the gluten-free community that you should also check out if you don't already. And everyone up here, of course. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all. I want everyone to give a round of applause for our team. And